Luke Jones, a Festivus edition of WNST. How about that? But for all of that, was not an easy afternoon on Sunday afternoon. I mean, they're in it by as little as maybe the Jacoby Jones miracle catch. I mean, they really took it down to the nub on Sunday afternoon, right?
Yeah, I mean, they certainly made it tough. I mean, you think about where they were late in the first half. I mean, Lamar Jackson is literally an inch and a half, 2 inches away from making it, assuming Tucker makes the extra point, a 27-7 game. I mean, the route was going to be on, and that didn't happen. And from that point on, it was an absolute struggle. And frankly, the Browns had some opportunities to get themselves over the hump, even before the final drive where C.J. Mosley gets the interception. But credit this Ravens team. They never make it easy. We know that. And that was the case back in the day when they were making the playoffs regularly and winning Super Bowls and doing those types of good things. They figured out a way to finish off the game. And I think you have to give this defense credit, even though it wasn't their best performance. And certainly they had some issues with leaky coverage down the field, and we'll talk about that as we get into Chargers week now for the second time in 3 weeks. But I think it's, for the Ravens, for their fans, it's been a long 5 or 6 years. It has been. Not that this team has been bad, but... By
the way, it's been a long 5 or 6 years for Mosley and for Harbaugh, you know, for all these guys, right? And sure. Mosley and some of these guys, they weren't on the winning team. You know what I mean? Like, it feels like, most of these guys... No, most of these guys don't know what it's like to win, right?
Well, and that's the thing, and that's why I've kind of contested this whole... And not so much this team, but the last few years, because, I mean, the Ravens have been in this position several times. It's not as though they've been finishing 5-11 every year. But people have said, well, you know, you don't want to be playing the Ravens this time of year, and they know how to win. But I thought Jimmy Smith, it was really telling hearing him talk about this after the game. And, of course, he had the 2 interceptions, great performance by him. But he flat out said, I came in here in 2011, and we got to the AFC Championship game, and we won the Super Bowl my second year. And not that you don't appreciate it, but you really get the sense that, I guess this is what we always do around here. And to have the appreciation for this division championship, and keep in mind, he was out for the year in 2014 when they made it as a wild card and got to the second round. So Jimmy Smith, the last time he tasted playing in a playoff game, it was the Super Bowl where he was making the stop on Michael Crabtree or a hold or however you want to view that final fourth down play in the end zone. But I think it just does speak to how much things have changed around here. And as far as those that you talk about that really have a winning pedigree, it's not many. I mean, you're talking about Terrell Suggs. I mean, Joe Flacco's standing on the sideline now. So unless Lamar Jackson gets hurt, he's not a factor in this whole thing. And
I still think he's a factor if they're down 10 points in the fourth quarter.
Well, 10 points, I don't know. I think it'd have to be pretty big at this point. But that's not the point I was trying to make. The point I was trying to make is you're only dealing with a handful of guys that were around here when this team got to a Super Bowl and won a Super Bowl. You talk about the head coach, certainly. You talk about Terrell Suggs, a few other individuals, Marshall Yanda, Justin Tucker, Sam Cook, Morgan Cox. But you were largely dealing with a team that, even the 14 team, there aren't that many guys left over from that year even. So this is a young group, a hungry group that has some savvy veterans, some experienced veterans with been through some wars here, been through some wars elsewhere. But this really feels like the dawning of kind of a new era with Lamar Jackson leading the way, of course. But you have a lot of guys that are going to be lining up playing in their first playoff game on Sunday against the Chargers, and it's going to be fun. It's going to be interesting, and I'm not going to sit here and say that the Ravens can't make a run. I said that after the Chargers game, and I'll say that again after they figured out a way, even though they were far from their best against the Browns on Sunday.
Want to give some love to all of our WNST sponsors as we enter 2019. First thing up, I'm drinking out of my Pizza John's cup here. They will be open this week. Just wait in line. The pizza will be good. I haven't been to Pizza John's in like a month and a half. I got to get down there. I've been sick. I'm under the weather. Little Pizza John's for Festivus. Also our friends at Strategic Factory. Marketing, printing, promotional goods of all kinds. You've seen them at the Ravens games. You've gotten the koozies. printed stuff like this and like this. Anything you print that's branded apparel for signage for your company, making your business stronger and your marketing stronger into 2019. You need our friends at Strategic Factory. Also our friends at Buffalo Wild Wings in Bel Air, where they got the $5 game day menu up at the festival. Make sure you stop by and see Joe and the crew up in Bel Air. We're going to get up there for a Terps game later on in the month, but we are riding the Festivus wave. I'm going to be riding that later on in the week when I chat with Dr. Kevin Crutchfield from LifeBridge Sports Health Medicine Institute and Dr. Craig Bennett, who does orthopedics. He's got to take a look at my elbow. I'm a little tricky right now. I got to be honest with you. They are the new game plan for sports-related athletes, injuries, and all sorts of weekend warriors. LifeBridge Health Sports Medicine Institute with us and doing great conversations about all things injury. And, that's one thing, mentioning injuries around here, right? This team has been very, very blessed with health. In recent weeks, lately, all the star players. That has been as much of a formula as I go back and write Purple Rain 1 and Purple Rain 2, that if they're on that pathway, it is about, they've had some good fortune here, especially after 4 and 5, right? I mean, we're all going to be looking back over these last 7 or 8 weeks and saying, what the heck happened beyond Lamar? Because I think Lamar made lots of other things happen. But the nervousness of Sunday is that, this team won 10 games, and it feels like everything about it has been sweaty, right? I mean, all parts of this season have been sweaty for everybody, right?
Yeah, I mean, and to get to your original point, I mean, it's kind of funny to say that about the health when your starting quarterback went down, but you kind of see what that spawned. You see what evolved from there. And said all along, this wasn't a Lamar Jackson being better than Joe Flacco thing as much as it was circumstantial, and I think what they transformed into, what they evolved into just happened to be a better fit, and you just got to a point where you weren't going to go back to hypotheticals to go back to Flacco. So it is crazy that you talk about health being such a big story, and you're right, by the way, but to lose your starting quarterback midway through the season and that we're talking in those terms, it does speak to how healthy they've been elsewhere.
Well, just think of the guys that have been missing over the course of time, whether it's Tavon Young, whether it's Marshall Yanda, just the guys that have been completely unavailable. Even Ronnie Stanley, Jimmy Smith, sure.
Jimmy Smith's the biggest one that comes to mind, even though he's not the same guy that he was prior to the Achilles and how injuries have kind of piled up. But, 2014, no Jimmy Smith. What was the problem in the playoffs? Their secondary stunk. 2016, they lose Jimmy Smith in week 13, week 14. Their secondary collapsed down the stretch. And last year, same thing. Maybe not a collapse, but it wasn't as good. But you're right. I mean, they have been very fortunate. When you look at their list, when you look at their roster of players on injured reserve right now, who can you really point to and say, boy, they really missed that guy? I'm not talking about guys that couldn't have been contributors, like Willie Henry. He would have been part of their defensive line rotation, offered some nice things as a pass rusher last year, but you can't say that his injury and his absence has drastically altered their season, whereas last year, not so much 16 other than Jimmy Smith at the very end of the season, but certainly last year in 2015, one of the big storylines was just how gutted they were by injuries at some bad places. So it really does speak to how fortunate they've been in that regard. And I think you have to give the organization, give players, coaches, strength and conditioning staff, the training room, you have to give them all credit as well that there's a lot of luck that goes into injuries, more than any of us probably care to admit. But they've been able to stay healthy, and I think you look at them going into Wild Card Weekend. Chris Moore clearly was banged up because they had some different guys returning kicks late in the second half. But beyond that, seems like they got out of the game okay. Of course, we don't know until we'll get into the practice week, but they seem very much poised to maximize this thing as much as they can. And as much as we'll talk about this offense and continue to talk about it, and now the Chargers having a second shot at it after seeing it a first time already, talking about that dynamic, there's no reason why this team can't max out, so to speak, and get as far as they're capable of going. And if that's the AFC Championship, great. If that's the Super Bowl, who knows? I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say they can't do anything, even if on paper you look at this and say, okay, rookie quarterback, as you pointed out, They're always playing these close games. Every single game of the Lamar Jackson era has been a one-score game at some point in the fourth quarter. So it tells you it never comes easy, but hey, you just look at where they stand. 6-1 is 6-1, and to be able to do that after where they were at the midpoint of the season, and not knowing where they were going, and so much talk about quarterback and head coach and other veteran players, but for them to be 10-6 and AFC North champions, that's an accomplishment, and I would not write them off whatsoever to be playing still a few weeks from now.
Yeah, there's no super team out there. Luke Jones is here. He is Baltimore Luke out on Twitter. He will be in Owings Mills all week. Reminder, if the Ravens do play in Foxborough next week, because the 6 beats the 3 and we wind up going not to Kansas City, we'll be doing a bus trip up to Foxborough. We'll not be doing a bus trip to Kansas City, as you can imagine. Look, we're going to have a lot of time here to preview the Chargers this week. We got New Year's. All that's happening, right? We got these other games going on. We're going to have a lot of coaching changes and Black Monday and the Dirk Cutters and the Todd Bowles and anybody else that's going to be gone by lunchtime, day after tomorrow or whatever, once Marvin comes in and meets with Mike Brown and all the other stuff that's going to happen. I want to give the Browns a little time here because it may be some time before we talk about the Browns. And, hey, Greg Williams probably be the first guy gone, and they'll be bringing in maybe John's brother for all we know in Cleveland. But I would say the Cleveland Browns, this is the first time I've seen them play ever. And I never believed in Derek Anderson. I never saw anything in Tim Couch or any of the guys they've had here. But this Baker Mayfield character is going to be trouble around here. That much is for sure.
You really got the sense on Sunday. And look, we were all focused on the here and now. The Ravens needing to win and to clinch the AFC North and to make the playoffs and to send the Steelers home. But from a big picture standpoint, just taking a step back and looking at this as a football fan, looking at this as an AFC North observer, how could you not watch Sunday's game and think, you know what? If this pans out for the Ravens, and Lamar Jackson, we know he needs to get better as a passer, and we can talk about that. We'll continue to talk about that, no matter how far the Ravens go over these next few weeks. And certainly, Baker Mayfield needs to continue to develop, continue to get better, and the Browns are going to have a very interesting decision as far as what they do with their coaching staff. But it's not that hard to kind of take a step back from what happened on Sunday and envisioning those two guys going head-to-head another 20 times over the next decade. I mean, it just you have to be impressed with what Baker Mayfield has done, with what Lamar Jackson has done. They're different types of players, but, I mean, there's just something really fun, really intriguing, really worrisome if you're a Ravens fan watching Baker Mayfield, and probably the Steelers and Cincinnati thinking the same thing. And I think the Steelers and Cincinnati and Cleveland watch what Lamar Jackson can do and his unique skill set and just think, we're in trouble if this kid figures out a way to become a more consistent passer. So it's fun, though, when you think about these guys. They won Heisman trophies in back-to-back years. They were both first-round picks in the same draft, and they both play in the same division. And to just think and other players are on the field, you get that. But just to think what Lamar Jackson, Baker Mayfield had to offer, it's pretty.
Oh, they're going to put this on a Thursday night next year or Monday. This will move to a primetime thing again, right?
It should because it was entertaining, right? I mean, it's really fun to think about those possibilities. And look, Ben Roethlisberger presumably isn't going away for another year or two. I mean, I know he's talked about retirement, but I mean, he's still someone that's still playing at a high level. So I think it'd be premature to crown any other quarterback in this division, but it sure is fun to think about the possibilities of Lamar Jackson, Baker Mayfield going head to head, and who knows, maybe there'll be another Week 17 meeting at some point where it's a winner-take-all game in the AFC North. So it's just fun, and you're right. I mean, I think say what you want about Mayfield's attitude and things that he says and interactions with Hugh Jackson or what he did at Ohio State, planting the flag in college. I mean, there's definitely some things that can rub you the wrong way about him, but he competes. And you have to give this Browns team some credit from the standpoint of this game was on the verge of being an absolute blowout. and they fought their way to the point where they were one 15-yard pass away from beating the Ravens, sending them home, and clinching their first winning season since 2007. So I think for the first time in a long time, we're going to be looking at the Browns in the preseason and understanding that they still have to make good decisions. They still have their coaching staff to figure out. They got to draft well. But I think this is going to be the first time in a long time you're probably thinking the Browns have a hell of a chance to win more games than they lose. And to your point, Derek Anderson never made you feel that way. Tim Couch, Johnny Manziel, go through all the quarterbacks that they've had since they've come back into the NFL. It really feels like there's a changing of the guard in the AFC North, at least to the standpoint of Cleveland Browns aren't going to be doormats anymore, and I think the Ravens came very close to learning that in a very cruel way on Sunday before C.J. Mosley's interception.
He is Baltimore, Luke. We are together all week long through the new year out into Owings Mills, and Luke will be on the scene out there for all the press conferences. And a benefit that they wind up staying on turn, right? Like, I thought they would take the Sunday night game and move that to Sunday. We thought that when we were at the Sunday night game before, but they don't play it that way. The Ravens are going to play a 1 o'clock game on turn. I guess all of those Chargers fans out in Southern California are going to have to get up for Bloody Marys early in the morning as usual, but they certainly didn't do the LA TV market any blessing, and maybe they did. I mean, I don't know. No one there cares about the Chargers. I was just there last week, but this is a fascinating rematch, a fascinating Eric Weddle, Phillip Rivers thing. I mean, it was a great game last week. They're all scouted up on both sides. This is an interesting game this week and a difficult game for the Ravens, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many. I thought you and I didn't get a chance to talk maybe in as great a detail of that game as we typically do because of the Christmas holiday and whatnot. But that game was so interesting from the standpoint of the Ravens absolutely dominated that football game in the first half, but they ended up going 0 for 3 inside the red zone. They make the mistake early in the second half. The Chargers come back, score a touchdown, take the lead. Jackson makes the beautiful throw to Mark Andrews for the touchdown. They come back and kick the long field goal. And then their offense did nothing the rest of the game. I mean, literally, they went 3 and out 3 times in a row after that, and the next time they picked up a first down was after the Marlon Humphrey interception. So we've talked so much about this running game, how unique this offense is, college, high school principles. I mean, they're doing lots of unconventional stuff that you typically don't see in the NFL. We've talked about that since week 11, and that's not going to change at least for the rest of the year. We'll talk about that in the offseason and how it's going to need to evolve and what they're going to do with their passing game and how they get Lamar Jackson more consistent, throwing outside the numbers. But this is who they are right now. That's not going to change, and that's fine. But it's going to be fascinating to see the Chargers, who held the Ravens to 21 yards on their first 10 carries of the second half after the Ravens gutted them pretty well through on the ground in the first half a couple weeks ago. It's going to be fascinating to see what they have for this Ravens offense and what Greg Roman and Marty Morningwood come up with in turn, understanding that familiarity is going to be there. And John Harbaugh joked a little bit about it after the game and said, well, I guess we're not going to have to prepare quite as much, so we might get a little more sleep. And what he meant by that is they're going to prepare, obviously, but they've done a lot of the groundwork here. They know the Chargers very well. They're only going to have they're going to have another game to study. They're going to study themselves and what they did against Cleveland. But it is really going to be interesting. And I'll throw this out there. The Ravens made the Chargers look absolutely pitiful offensively. I mean, they were absolutely pitiful. The Ravens made them look like the worst offense in the NFL pretty much.
Well, there was a massive amount of confusion for Phillip Rivers and Eric Weddle, and I think it was a real head game of a game for him. And I don't know why it worked so well against him, and Baker Mayfield just had his way, right? I mean, literally.
Well, every game's different, but my point I was trying to make is, can you really expect to shut down Phillip Rivers and the Chargers offense to that degree again? Probably not. So, long story short, I think the Ravens need to be more efficient, more productive offensively than they were against the Chargers the first time around. And I think it'd be tough to expect this defense to give up 10 points again. Let's face it, and the one touchdown came on a short field. I think it'd be a tall order to expect the defense to duplicate that to that dramatic degree. So this offense is going to have to play better. But on the flip side, you mentioned the Chargers coming to the East Coast, 1 o'clock game, so the league's not doing them any favors. Maybe a little returning of the favor of the Ravens having to go to the West Coast on a short week. But it's going to be fascinating, and I still think that this Chargers team is one to be reckoned with, and just because the Ravens handled them in Week 16 doesn't mean they're just going to roll out the ball and expect it to go the same exact way, because I think they're going to have to play a crisper, more efficient game offensively than they did the first time around, where they moved the ball a lot, but they didn't put the ball in the end zone, and it didn't hurt them that time around. I feel like that could haunt them if that same type of thing is duplicated.
Luke and I are going to be here through the new year and getting you ready for the 1 o'clock Sunday game. We're going to have guests everywhere from out in California all the way back here all week long. All of our WNST programming brought to you by our friends at Charles Newsonoff and Sons. Sydney's still out there after the holiday. We're right around the corner from Valentine's Day and the Super Bowl and all that good stuff. Go see them in Parkville. Since 1923, true love comes in all shapes and sizes, and there's always something for everyone's budget at Charles Newsonoff and Sons. Let's grow old together. Find them at charlesnewsonoff.com. Also, the Lee Tessier team selling my condo and can be selling your real estate as well. Baltimore's premier realty team and the folks I'm trusting with my real estate transactions. And then Lee's got some Dundalk background as well up there in Harford County doing it right. We stop up and see him every time I stop and get a Box Hill crab cake as well. So I'll be getting up there to see Tommy sometime soon as well. Over 50 years of experience, the Tessier team is there for you. Learn more at leetessier.com. And if you want to buy my condo, see Lee. We'll buy that too. Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast. The tasty coffee, the best fried chicken in the land, and of course, using the ROFO Rewards app as well as the card itself. When you pump your gas, earn your points, get your fried chicken and your Western fries free of charge. I think they still might have some eggnog laying around as well. Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast. Also, final shout out to my man, Bill Cole and Cole Roofing. He will be here to start the year. I think Bill will be my first piece that I will do in 2019 on Wednesday morning. He joins me every week. Every Thursday, we do the Community and Charity Series. Don't let it goof on your roof. If you've got a commercial roof space, you want to learn about solar and all that James Bond stuff, Bill Cole has the answers for you. It is Cole Roofing and ColeRoofing.com. And before I go any further, I want to give a shout out because I ran out of beer. It's true this weekend at the condo. My wife and I have been in and out of town and sick and California and maybe going on the road again next week. And I literally ran out of beer. So Paul King, Johnny Bev, I'm coming for you for New Year's Eve. Lottery, beer, booze, and the best prices in Baltimore. Get on out for New Year's, last year, this year, any year. King Discount Liquors in Rosedale and Pulaski Highway. Luke, I want to talk a little bit about the post-game celebration because I think, once all this gets into the afterglow, we'll be talking about the Chargers all week. We're going to be talking about all these other matchups, 4 games this week, 4 more next week, all of that on the road to Atlanta. And, of course, for those of you who don't know, Luke and I will be in Atlanta all week long on Radio Row, so we've got some great sponsors for that and some awesome stuff coming up. Whether the Ravens are there or not, I'm hoping the Ravens are going to be there. And, Luke, I don't know that I would bet against that, but I've liked what I've seen from these human beings over the last 7 weeks. The character guys, the integrity guys, the veteran guys, the Weddles and the Suggs who are long in the tooth and yonder who appreciate this. The last thing I saw when I left the stadium, Luke, and I know you see this every week, and maybe once in a while you take a picture of it or whatever to share it because the fans don't see it. The last thing I saw when I left the stadium, I ran in to go to the bathroom in the main bowl, and I ran up into the bowl of the stadium. I looked out on the field, and there's Marshall Yonda out there with his kids and his family, Eric Weddle out there on the field with his kids and his family. Literally, Joe Ortiz was out there, but the 2 veteran guys with their kids and their wives throwing the football around, an hour after a Ravens final, playoff. They're going to have a playoff game next week. But this was a moment of, joy. They have some special guys on the team, and I know John has said that, and I know you're around this team. It's young, but it's sort of old in a lot of ways. And I think Ray Lewis and Ed Reed, that era, it was a different time. This is the first time they've won really without Ed and Ray in that sort of a way. I know they had the other year with New England, but this is a time where I think we believe a little bit that they're going to be playing football 2 weeks from now. At least I believe that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're selling the 2014 team a little short. I mean, that was a team that had 2 14-point leads in New England in the divisional round. But
fair enough.
To your point, it hasn't happened very often, and it's different now. And, it's different strictly from the sense that Joe Flacco is no longer the quarterback for this football team. And it's a rookie. It's a 21-year-old. I mean, Lamar Jackson's going to be 22 years old in the month later on in January. I mean, it's pretty remarkable when you think about that. But I mean, there's lots of high character guys on this team, and I don't think that's ever been in dispute. I mean, the one thing that has kind of been a constant, almost to the point where I think fans have kind of rolled their eyes about it a little bit, and I get it because ultimately this is a pass-fail kind of industry. I mean, you're trying to win, and if you don't win, people aren't going to be happy about that. But this has been, a high-character team, but the last few years have been that way as well. I think you feel good for these guys from a standpoint of they've finally broken through after so many close calls. And in the case of an Eric Weddle, who's never won a championship, this is, you'd have to say, his last best chance, right? I mean, there's no guarantee he's going to be back with the Ravens next year, and certainly has a high cap figure, and he's a year older. And, Marshall Yanda's been to the pinnacle, but after what he went through last year, and he acknowledged he's kind of a year-to-year kind of pace right now as far as his career goes. I mean, yeah, you feel good for these guys. As much as fans are frustrated, and sometimes there's a perception that players don't really care because they make a lot of money and this is their job, it's not their hobby, this is their livelihood. They put a hell of a lot into it. And
seeing Tony Jefferson dance and seeing how the young guys are dealing with it and the veteran guys, there was an energy there that was a really good energy. And it wasn't too much, and it wasn't confetti and champagne. It was a really nice thing to see because we haven't seen it in a long time, Luke, right? I mean, we haven't gone down there and seen that sort of unfettered joy in a long time.
Yeah, sure. And I'll tell you who the most impressionable moment for me was I actually had a chance I bumped into Zach Orr, of course, former Ravens linebacker. He's a coaching assistant.
I saw
now.
You tweeted about that.
Yeah, and he had a big smile on his face. And you think about it, his career came to such an abrupt end. I mean, really a heartbreaking kind of thing because this guy looked like he was on his way to being, a fringe Pro Bowl kind of player and probably was going to make some good money in his career, but had a big smile on his face, and he just said, boy, we really needed that one. And it struck me that his final NFL game, because remember, he had the herniated disc in his neck and sat out that Week 17 game against Cincinnati on the road. His final NFL game was the heartbreaker against Pittsburgh on Christmas 2 years ago. So you think about even guys like him and guys that have moved on and retired or, you feel good for them. I mean, certainly we're very focused on discussion as outsiders from, not just the fan perspective, because we do have more access and get to talk to these guys, but we're not living it. We're not in that locker room being part of that team. So, to see some of the joy, to see, frankly, some relief, I think there absolutely was some relief in that locker room, but lots of smiles, and you feel good for them. And look, did their reaction, was it any different than what was going on in the Philadelphia locker room on Sunday or any other team that's clinched a playoff spot over the last couple of weeks? Probably not. But you just think about where they've been the last couple of years specifically.
But I don't think this is, they're happy to just get in like Buffalo was last year or whatever. Like, it doesn't feel that way to me. It feels more mature to me than that from a lot of the guys.
I don't know. I mean, you've been in more post-game locker room celebrations than I have in my career. We'll see. I don't think it has much to do with demeanor as much as just what's the matchup, how healthy are they, how are they playing right now, how is I almost said San Diego, how are the Chargers going to adjust, and how are the Ravens going to adjust to what they saw from the Chargers the first time around. So, I think all of those things mean a lot more to me than how they handle themselves in the postgame. But it's a lot of fun for them and a long time coming for some of these guys. And some of these guys, you think about a Matt Judon, you think about a Zadarius Smith. These are guys that have been around now for 3, some of them 4 years, and this is their first chance to play in January, so you have to feel good for them. And
Brandon Williams, he hasn't been in a playoff game, has he? Or was he there in 14? Brandon Williams, was he here in 14?
No, Brandon, 2014.
Yeah, okay. So
You keep forgetting about that 2014
I
team.
know! I sat in Foxborough with you. I remember how awful. 8 hours on the bus. That's probably why I forget it. I want to forget it, for crying out loud,
You forget all about Rashawn Melvin.
What's that? Engelbert Humperdinck had a song, Am I That Easy to Forget? Yes, you are, when you blow 2 touchdown leads in Foxborough. I try to forget all of them. We actually won in Pittsburgh before that, right? So
no doubt.
Yeah, so I forget about the Pittsburgh victory. Okay.
But again, to your point, there are a lot of guys who have been around for more than just a minute here in Baltimore who have not experienced this. So good for them. And now they'll have their chance to make their mark. And, hey, if you're Lamar Jackson, you're looking at what Joe Flacco and that 2008 Ravens team was able to do, and he's trying to see if he can one-up it.
But by the way, you keep saying 2014, like it was a minute and a half ago. Dude, it's 2019 now.
I know, but
it's been a while. I'm a little giddy here about all this.
But my point is that wasn't just a team that was just happy to be there. I mean, they had very much had designs of getting to a Super Bowl. I mean, they were 1 or 2 more plays away from getting back to the AFC Championship that year. But the overall point, though, is correct. Those moments, those opportunities have been few and far between for a long time for this team, and they break through, and now they have an opportunity, albeit against the Chargers team that, regardless of what happened in Week 16, that's a pretty good football team, and I'm really intrigued to see how both of these teams respond and adjust to what they saw just a couple weeks ago. That you don't see that too often, especially in a playoff kind of setting. It's one thing if there's a quirk in the schedule and you play a divisional opponent in Week 2 and then Week 5, or Week 2 and then Week 4. But for this to be Week 16 and then Wild Card Weekend, it's going to be really interesting.
Big football all the way around all week, and we will be lighting the Festivus lights here. I got to pull out the purple lights and get them in the studio, so I'm going to decorate the place here for 2019 as we get going. All of our WNST coverage brought to you by our friends at Amici's of Little Italy. I sent some of the Cleveland guys over there to High Street to dine on the pane rotundo and the meatballs. They came back with the chicken parm. Make sure you go see Chef Scotto and Chef Rolando in Little Italy with our friends at Amici's. Also brought to you by the Modell Lyric. I'm looking forward to the John Mellencamp show. I saw my boy Rudy over at the Ravens game on Sunday as well. Check out the website. Stay up to date with everything going on at the Modell Lyric. Kansas coming on March 1st. Dancing with the Stars next week as well. There's always magic at the Modell Lyric. Jim Gaffigan doing some comedy on February 8th. Brett Floyd. All sorts of good stuff. George Lopez. Modell-lyric.com for all of that. And I've got to hit court this week and get some flowers in here. I got some spots in my studio for some Raven flowers, some Sporticulture. They send flowers around the world, around the country. They're a click away. Go to Sporticulture.com. They are local. They have the NFL branding. They can do it in any team. So if you've got a friend that's maybe an Eagles fan, whatever it is, you can ship these flowers with one click. You can even send some funeral flowers to your Steelers friends. That's a good gag gift. Sporticulture.com. Nasty at WNST. I'm bad. It reaches me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook. And don't forget to buy a Toyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day. That is there for you on your mobile device. From wherever you are, you can listen. So many of you tuned in live on Facebook Live and YouTube Live. I appreciate that. Throw me a note. Find us out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault. You can listen anytime you want from anywhere in the world. Finally, our morning newspaper ships to your email inbox at 7 a.m. each and every morning. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness at planetfitness.com, where it's still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life. They're not going to hold it against you. You didn't go in 2018. They got plenty of room for you in 2019. $5 down, $10 a month. Can't beat it. There's one right in the neighborhood. Get some inspiration at planetoftriumphs.com. It's Planet Fitness. Also, our friends at the Maryland Jockey Club and Laurel, where they are racing into the winter. You can find the entries at WNST.net, as well as in our morning newspaper that delivers at 7 a.m. each and every morning. Last but never least, any breaking news happens first on the WNST Tech Service. That's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Dennis Colossus will be here on Thursday, getting you ready for Festivus. And the San Diego, Carson, Los Angeles, soon to be somewhere else, Chargers playoff 1 o'clock, Festivus. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.